Alright, so first up, we have a video by Force Gaming called New Diablo 4 Gameplay Leaks Are Very Promising. Let's get right into this video.
So the Diablo 4 endgame beta has been underway for roughly 2 weeks now. At least that's when reports started popping up of people gaining access. Blizzard sent invites out to a small pool of players to specifically test D4's various endgame systems, which include Helltide region-wide events that unlock upon reaching World Tier 3 Nightmare difficulty. During these Helltide events, enemies on the map become—
Wait, let's read this real quick. Helltide. While roaming Sanctuary on foot or atop your trusty steed, be aware of your surroundings, for you might find yourself caught in a Helltide. This is a new region-wide event that becomes available to heroes only once they have reached World Tier 3, Nightmare difficulty. In a Helltide, the servants of Lilith are empowered, having their difficulty increased, but dropping loot worthy of the danger. Her mightiest minions are also out in greater force, and the very ground of Sanctuary as you know it has been morphed by the surge in demonic activity. That's pretty crazy. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Become empowered, increasing their difficulty, while also dropping better loot. In addition, the number of elite enemies roaming around is ramped up. Takes a zone, makes everything harder, gives you some nice rewards and access to—
So you mean there's actual challenge? You can't just spam your abilities and blast everything as soon as your ability taps their body. That sounds good. That sounds good to me. It sounds like Blizzard's actually doing something to ramp up the difficulty a little bit, to make it more engaging and fun.
To these chests. Beyond Helltides, there are Nightmare dungeons. This system unlocks upon locating your very first Nightmare sigil.
Alright, let's check this out. Nightmare dungeons. We've crafted a difficulty of Diablo dungeons straight out of your nightmares. No, really. Nightmare dungeons. Nightmare difficulty dungeons in Diablo 4 unlock upon locating your first Nightmare sigil. Each sigil corresponds to a specific dungeon somewhere within Sanctuary. These sigils will add special modifiers to their dungeon, increasing the ferocity of the Hell Servants waiting for you inside and providing higher rarity loot. Through completing Nightmare dungeons, you will recover even more powerful sigils, introducing increasingly death-defying modifications and challenges for you to overcome. As you progress into higher and more challenging world tiers, new Nightmare dungeons will become available for you to explore. That sounds pretty cool. It actually sounds pretty cool.
Each sigil will correspond to one specific dungeon somewhere in the game. You go to that dungeon, enter and activate the sigil, and then this turns the normal dungeon into a Nightmare variation.
I gotta say, the game looks clean so far. I know we're not actually playing it yet. There could be problems, blah, blah, blah. But just by looks alone, it looks pretty clean.
As you expect, this will make things harder. Specifically, it adds special modifiers to the dungeon and the enemies within. And they increase difficulty. In turn, yes, it yields better loot, along with another powerful sigil, like a higher tier, granting you access to another more difficult version of a Nightmare dungeon. Rinse and repeat. This is the game's—
So, interesting. I mean, so the sigils are just leveling up the difficulty and that's it. So it's essentially the same dungeon. But it sounds like that's their way of giving you different dungeons. I guess it's not that cool when I think about it like that. Because exactly like he said, it's rinse and repeat. You're doing the same dungeon over again, but it's just slightly harder. I hope they have more original content in this game than that, because that's actually a little bit disappointing.
Closest thing to Diablo 3 Rifts. However, from what we've seen so far, it appears to be a little slower paced with unique objectives. So instead of killing monsters to fill up a progress bar and then defeating a boss you did in D3, you're asked to do stuff kind of like D3 bounty objectives just within a dungeon. Then there is the Whispers of the Dead system. This is the closest thing to Diablo 3 bounties. These are tasks for you to complete.
Wait, let me read this. Okay. Whispers of the Dead. The Tree of Whispers has a few loose ends to tie and needs your help settling the score. Displayed on your map, players will see various whispers scattered throughout Sanctuary. Complete the associated task, and be met with experience, gold, and grim favors. The number of grim favors you receive from completing a whisper varies, but once you've collected 10 grim favors from the dearly departed, they can be exchanged at the Tree of Whispers for a bevy of loot and experience to reward your heroics. I mean, that sounds cool. Maybe it's just because I read it in an epic voice. I don't know. But, yeah, on the surface, that sounds cool.
Complete that are scattered all around the game's world. Completing a task gets you experience, gold, and grim favors. They can be exchanged at this thing called the Tree of Whispers, and this is going to give you loot and experience. It's just rotating quests for you to do, essentially. And then the final main system of content is the Fields of Hatred, which are designated PvP zones where players...
One more time, everybody. Fields of Hatred. Born from the contempt of mortals, Mephisto has cursed specific areas of sanctuary, transforming them into deadly fields of hatred. These designated PvP zones are the proving grounds for players looking to bring renown to their name through blood and zeal. While inside the Fields of Hatred, players can dispatch demons to collect seeds of hatred. To make use of these seeds, you'll need to bring them to the Altar of Extraction, where they can be smashed into red dust. Be quick to convert your seeds of hatred to red dust. They are the desire of other players lurking in the zone, and if they are skilled enough to overtake you in combat, your seeds of hatred will be dropped. Okay, that's interesting. A little bit of risk and reward there. I like it.
Players can engage in open, free-for-all combat with others, but also enemy NPCs within these zones will drop seeds of hatred.
Nice.
Collect these, bring them to this altar where they can be smashed into red dust, and that dust can be used to purchase PvP cosmetics and mounts.
That's kind of interesting, though, the way that he just described that. If you just run from other players and you focus on fighting just mobs or whatever, you can just get these seeds of hatred from mobs. So it doesn't have to be a PvP experience. It sounds like, or just minor PvP aspects in the sense of, I don't want to fight you. I'm going to run away, and then I'll fight this other mob over here.
However,
sounds
if another
cool.
player catches you as you're trying to convert your seeds into dust, they can kill you, take all of your seeds, and turn it in for themselves. So there's the four main content systems of things you'll be doing, but then layered on top of that are the Paragon boards, which...
Wait, hold on a second. Hold on. Ah, man, I always have this problem. As soon as I put on the beanie, the most powerful woven beanie of smiles, it overpowers my eyes even. All right. Let's get back into the video.
Which you unlock upon reaching level 50. It's the endgame character growth system. It's like the endgame long-term progression. Your hero earns experience, they unlock Paragon points, you spend those points to unlock powerful boost and bonuses, but also things like new titles and sockets. It's a rather interesting form of character development and progression in addition.
But can you pay to buy the points? That's what I want to know.
To the whole gear progression system. So yeah, those are the 5 main systems that we, as far as we currently know, account for a bulk of what Diablo 4 will have for in-game content. Unfortunately though, given that the current test is under NDA, we really have no idea how good or not any of this content is, or we don't know what people think about it.
Right.
Because they can't talk about it.
Right.
False. No, that is false because absolutely everybody is breaking NDA. Demon of the Light 13 is breaking NDA. Go Home Pat You're Drunk, Sarcastic Adbot, Feces of Atheism, and even Gabe Newell himself is out there breaking NDAs to share their experience,
talking about
leaking info, details, mechanics, and impressions of the beta. And you know what? My sincerest thanks for each of them because there's just a boatload of information and details here. I'm really excited to report that a lot of it is looking really good. The overall tone, the impressions, and just the general feel of the feedback that I've seen online has been generally very positive. I am pumped to jump into today's video. But yeah, lots of people breaking their NDA to share their experience of the D4 endgame beta. And while it doesn't seem like we're getting a lot of detailed criticism about the actual systems of the various features, there just have been a lot of general overall impressions and thoughts, and also some points of concern and criticism. I want to start off with some some of the positive stuff, though, because like I said, that is
Let's hear
predominantly
it.
what I've been seeing.
I wanna hear it.
One of the first things I pulled was just talking about the game's combat system and overall feel. It said combat is so smooth and responsive. D3's engine and combat are unparalleled, but D4 actually feels better out the gate. Controls are tighter and more snappy. Talked about how when you spin around in D3, there's a little bit of the small turn radius. Well, that is gone in D4, so everything is quicker. Your character's moving around and more responsive to your inputs. And then also, it looks like they've increased flow of combat.
So it just feels better, am I right? It just feels better. That's cool.
Because it doesn't have that initial clunkiness that those first few levels of D3 have, which I totally know what he's talking about here. Whenever I start up a brand new season in D3, or just originally, I remember when playing through the campaign, things started really slow. The game felt a little slower paced, and I know it's the natural progression as your character powers up and as you get better gear for the overall speed of things to ramp up, but it seems pretty much out the gate that the speed and the feel of combat is better. That is saying a lot, because as it is, Diablo 3, I think, still has some of the best feel.
Because these types of games, a huge part, probably the largest part of the game is like the combat, how fun the combat is, how good the combat feels. And so if the combat doesn't feel good, people are probably going to stop playing the game. Maybe they'll even be so disappointed that they want to like get a refund or whatever you want to say. Like that's a huge deal for this type of game. So the combat feeling good, that's really reassuring.
Feeling combat in the ARPG genre. I've played a bit of Path of Exile as well, and that game feels a little off, just not quite as crisp as D3 to me. I would say the closest ARPG to the heft and the responsiveness would actually probably be Lost Ark. I think that's a game that's come the closest.
I could agree with that.
This game, it's got a really nice feel to it. D3 and Lost Ark, I'd put near the cream of the crop, just in my personal experience.
Yeah, Lost Ark, the action, the combat, it feels really clean and responsive. I agree. It's so satisfying.
They went on to mention that they felt the skill tree was extremely deep. They like how Blizzard is going back to this more complex ability customization. And that is also really good to hear. It's one of those things, though, that it's really hard to verify, you know, how deep, how complex it is, especially.
It's good to be able to customize. We all like to customize. I think that's a good thing. Complex can be okay if it gives you tons of options and makes you feel like you have a lot of like solid control on your character without it being impossible to figure out, you know.
Since you should really keep in mind with everything.
Well, come on. What do you guys think? Do you think it's important to have a lot of customization with a character, or do you want it to be super simple, streamlined, a brain dead like monkey right after like trauma head surgery could do it? You know what I mean?
Thing that we're going to take a look at here today. This is coming from people who have played a beta for under 2 weeks now. I think it's about 12 days it's been since people started being able to download the client and jump in, and that's assuming that servers kicked on right away. It is a overall limited amount of time in like the grand scale of ARPG playtimes. It's just a couple of weeks. So when you talk about things like itemization, long-term progression, but then also the depth and complexity
look at that blood splatter.
You're not going to get down to the bottom of it in just a couple of weeks of playtime. Assuming
look at those little tornadoes,
playing nonstop for 2 weeks, which probably isn't the case for most of them. I'm happy to hear that the combat seems really, really solid. That is probably for me the #1 most important thing, or it is at least what has me enjoying playing a game the most. What of course keeps me sticking around are a lot of the systems and features and things to do. Which, speaking of which, we had someone talk about how similar Diablo 4 feels and compared to Lost Ark, which for me is a positive, barring a few specifications. This coming from...
What are the similarities between Diablo 4 and Lost Ark? I want to know.
A thread titled Diablo 4 feels so similar to Lost Ark, in which they said you have mounts, you can stagger bosses, an open world map with world events and random quests that pop up in the zones as you complete and can do this.
Well, I mean, honestly, Lost Ark kind of set a standard. Sorry, I'm hearing my daughter freaking out there. Anyways, so Lost Ark essentially set a new standard for ARPGs. So if you don't do these things that people now, they felt it. They see how satisfying it is. It's nice to have a mount to go a little faster. It's nice to do these different things to bosses. It's nice to have the mini map, the open world map. It's a new standard. So if you don't do it, it's almost like, what are you doing?
With other members who are not partied with you. He went on to say it feels like he's playing Lost Ark 2 rather than playing Diablo 4. They added a ton of MMO elements to the game. This is something that we have known about. There are a lot of MMO-like features, which again is very akin to what Lost Ark does, and this has kind of pushed the game into feeling more of like an open-world adventure than a traditional hack-and-slash game. They also touched on the fact that dungeons are really dense to feel worth it compared to the open-world maps, and you can reset the dungeons at any time. It feels like kind of a halfway solution between rifts and maps. And I did see a lot of discussion about the dungeon system in this game in general.
This is looking pretty juicy, guys. Are we enjoying? I do so enjoy some good Diablo 4 leaks.
About people liking the way it was implemented in here. But on the reverse side of that, a lot of discussion, and I'll touch on it later when we dive into some of the negative feedback that we've seen. A lot of discussion about the open world feeling a bit too light, especially on enemies. And we saw numerous complaints of the game feeling a bit like a walking simulator when you were out in the open play space, but then having these really cool, high-octane, action-packed dungeons.
I mean, I guess that's okay. If the open world is a little bit empty, but then you jump into the dungeons and it feels super action-packed and rewarding and fun, I guess that just makes you more excited to get to the next dungeon and the next dungeon. So maybe that's good. Maybe it's a good, like, leading tactic.
I think in general that should be the balance. The dungeons should be more condensed and have a lot more going on moment to moment. But hopefully the open world isn't super empty so that you are spending most of your time walking around. But I think there can be some of that. It doesn't have to be monsters on every screen pan. As you're constantly walking, every single few meters new enemies are popping up. I don't think it needs to be that dense, because that kind of takes away the point of having a big open world, in my opinion. Some level of exploration.
Right. If you're in an open world, like, think about going for a walk in the forest, right? You're gonna be walking for a while and just enjoying the scenery before you see a rabbit run in front of you, or before you see a squirrel run up a tree, or before you maybe see a bear. It's not like it's action every single second. Some of it is just walking and enjoying the experience. So just finding that right balance of like, okay, I found a couple monsters. Heck yeah, this is cool. Crush them. And then, now I'm enjoying the scenery again, and I'm just trying to get to where I'm going, but I'm soaking it in as I go. Yeah, just find the balance.
And I think is good for the overall feel of an open world game. One tester said that they feel that Diablo 4 is like a combination of D3, Immortal, and World of Warcraft, saying to me, D4 is a combination of those three games, which I think is fantastic. There is so much to do.
Maybe that's a good thing.
Just running rifts and bounties. It rewards exploration and grinding. They've done a great job, and I'm looking forward to it. I absolutely love hearing that, because that's probably one of my biggest complaints whenever I come back to Diablo 3. I feel like all there is to do is run rifts and do bounties. Now, I know that over time, Diablo 3 has added other systems. They have
gotta add some more exciting systems and aspects of the game, for sure. Hopefully they learn from Diablo 3 in that regard.
Added other features and things to engage with in the end game, but regardless, it always feels like the two main things that I should be doing is just running rift after rift, getting keys, and then running greater rifts, and then doing bounties when I need the materials, and just complete that process over and over again.
Rinse and repeat.
I'm really hoping that with D4 they can have enough incentive into each of the systems, because like we touched on, there appear to be 4 main activity types in Diablo 4's end game, and then the progression of the Paragon boards. Even just having those extra layers, especially with some of those types being varied, having complete zone-wide events that will rotate which zone.
I am excited about zone-wide events. That sounds really fun.
the event is taking place on with the Hell Tides, and then also the Fields of Hatred doing kind of the same thing but for PvP, and then the Tree of Whispers being the quest that you go out on, and then of course the hard mode version, the Nightmare Dungeons. Having a healthy mix of activities for us to work towards, all of which will bring meaningful progression, because that's the other thing. If any of these systems don't bring some level of meaningful progression, odds are a lot of players, you know, with the exception of the first couple of weeks where people are just excited to try out everything, in the long term, you don't want to make it so that one activity is the primary thing you're doing. And I really feel like probably the best way to do that is to have different paths of progression. So resources you can only get by doing this activity and then that activity, to give the incentive, because we're going to min-max.
Yeah, exactly. People are going to do exactly what they need to do, no more, no less, right? For their progression, for them to feel like they're getting stronger and really enjoying the game and their personal experience. So they're not going to do the stuff that doesn't reward them or help them grow or whatever, or help them get stronger, you know. So it makes sense. Yeah, I agree.
We're going to do the thing that's going to be the quickest way of getting the reward that we want, however, whatever sort of power progression that ends up meaning. So basically forcing them into the different activities by having almost exclusive rewards, or if you don't want to do that, make sure everything is spread out evenly. But that is a real difficult task. So we'll have to see how they can incentivize all of these different activities.
Right.
Okay, this next bit here was talking about the comparisons that were popping up between D3 and D4. They said that they noticed a lot of people calling D4 a reskin of D3, but how having played it feels completely different. For one, talking about the fact that there are tons of powerful builds you can use, the new skill tree and the Paragon tree, the fact that legendary and set items aren't constantly raining from the sky, rare items are pretty rare now.
Making things feel more rewarding is a really good balance thing to do, because you shouldn't be getting, this is supposedly a super legendary item, but I'm getting them all the time. What's going on here? Like, yeah, it's definitely good to balance this stuff out. They're making some good decisions here.
I'm of two minds on this. You do want to have some semblance of loot pinata, but you don't want it to be so crazy. And I at least feel like D3 was a little bit overboard with the number of items that were constantly dropping as you push into those like higher tier of rifts. It just feels like inventory management is a part of these games, but when it becomes the thing that I'm spending the most amount of time doing in between runs, just constantly going through, are any of these minor upgrades compared to the ones that I have? Okay, no. Do I have to salvage these? It becomes really, really tedious and takes away from the enjoyment. So have it so that when loot drops, it is exciting. That is the goal, right? And I hope that's something that they can work towards.
Come on, guys. Listen up to your audience. Listen up to your player base, your fan base. You can make this game really good if you just listen.
Talk about the fact that gold actually has a high amount of value now, especially since it gives you a good chance of getting powerful items. There is no seemingly cap to the amount of gold that you're going to want. I presume here that they are talking about the fact that there is basically a gambling vendor, and that gambling vendor does have the chance to yield some of the best items in the game. So the more gold you have.
But can you buy gold? See, this is what scares me. It's like, we have this one NPC, and it's a loot box, or it's a gambling-based system. It's a random chance-based system where the most rare items in the game are like 0.0001% chance. But you can buy gold, so you can keep trying over and over and over. So is this like their pay-to-win angle? Like, what's going on here? That sketches me out a little bit.
The more you can gamble, the higher chance you have of getting items that you might want or trade if they are if they fall within the sphere of items that are tradable, which absolutely isn't everything. They said that the gameplay also feels improved from Diablo 3, feels much better, not to mention the huge amount of content and features the game has along with the open world. They went on to talk about how they really like the music in the game.
That's what we like to hear, right?
which is a nice addition. Of course, music does add a lot to the play experience if you're not one of those people who just mute it and run your Spotify list in the background. And then they wrap up by saying the D4 feels more akin to Diablo 1 than Diablo 2.
Okay.
It's got the dark atmosphere and all of that. And yeah, it's just looking really, really good. This is all really good, exciting news for me.
Yes.
And then finally, the other main post that I want to touch on was just in general saying that D4 from their experience is awesome. This thread was kind of funny because they were basically saying everything about being in the beta, also circumventing saying that they were in the beta. It opens up with, if I was in the beta, I wouldn't be able to tell you that this game is a love child.
This is brilliant. This is how you skirt the NDA. You don't admit that you were in the beta, but you say what you think you would have done and felt if you were in the beta. If I was in the beta, I wouldn't be able to tell you that this game is a love child between D2R, Diablo 2 Reaper of Souls, and Diablo Immortal. Heavily favoring the Immortal side, especially with its systems and open world play. I don't think I'd be able to tell you that I see many players in town, and half the quests and public events I would have done have had at least one other player helping me. Interesting.
Between D2R and D Immortal, heavily favoring the Immortal side, especially with its systems and open world play. I don't believe he's referring to monetization there. I think he's just generally talking about the open multiplayer MMO nature of the game. I don't think I'd be able to tell you that I see many players in town, and half the quest and public events have had at least one other player helping me.
That's cool.
I don't remember
like that.
D3 having talent trees and +2 skills stats on its gear like Diablo 4 may or may not have. I couldn't tell you that there's a horse for purchase as your mount, or that there's herbalism, mining, and skinning. That is something we found out when we saw the leaks a few weeks ago, or like a month or so ago.
Yeah,
the
we
game
saw that.
Basically has traditional gathering systems. While
That's
you're out
right.
in the world, you're going to see ore.
They really are taking some cues from Lost Ark here. Let's be honest, and it's a good thing. Evolve with the world, the gaming world around you, Blizzard. Good job.
And herbs and stuff like that, and you'll be able to skin apparently as well. Just classic MMO gathering for crafting, right? Then they said, I remember feeling alone in Diablo 3, loot raining from the heavens and uniques not existing. I can't say if I had the exact opposite experience for each of those categories in this new selective access game I just recently started playing, but who knows, because if I was in D4's beta, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. So yes, they are in the beta and they're talking about all of the stuff, and overall it's generally positive. I selfishly really love all of the MMO elements, and I know this is kind of
how is this sounding to you guys? Doesn't this sound reassuring? I mean, there was a little bit of a note where maybe the open world feels empty, but otherwise really positive notes across the board. And to be fair, this is early access, like testing stuff that people are playing here. So maybe there's more pay to win that they're going to throw in at the end, kind of like they did with Diablo Immortal. But hopefully not. Hopefully it's just a really fun, balanced game.
highly debated within the Diablo community, because it is a series that originally started as a single player offline game, and then it's slowly morphed over time with the constant connectivity of Diablo 3, and now it's basically like an MMO. And I feel like there are might be a lot of people who are traditional fans of the early iteration of the game and are sad that it's moved in this direction, but personally I prefer this style.
Yes,
keep in mind as
me
well, they have
too.
specifically talked about how the open world, you will be running into people, you will see them occasionally as you're doing quests and stuff, and of course you will see them in town. There's probably going to be concentrated numbers of people there, but specifically when you go into the one of the game's over 100 different dungeons, or when you're doing some story stuff, that will be instanced just to you. So they are finding a balance.
Makes sense.
It
Makes
is
sense.
an MMO light. It is an MMO ARPG.
Right. An ARPG with MMO aspects. It's not fully an MMO. It's not like you see hundreds of players around you constantly, but yeah, it's good. It's a good take. It's a good take, Blizzard. Good job.
Gee. Get it? Okay, a couple other quick things. We saw a thread talking about how they felt the endgame was better in D4 than D3. The core fundamentals of the game's design seem pretty good to me, like D3, but with a lot more depth and an interconnected endgame with multiple goals and objectives instead of just greater rifts.
That's really cool. See? You don't get to the end and you feel like you just do one thing over and over and over, and that's it. You have multiple aspects of gameplay to enjoy even at the end. That's nice.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And we've touched on this all throughout this video so far. The idea that they're going to have a lot more activities than just running greater rifts plus bounties as well, which they leaved out here. That sounds amazing to me. I really hope, again, that they can incentivize all of these different activities.
Yeah.
Now, while the overall tone of what I've seen and this video in general is positive, it's talking about some of the great aspects of the game.
Yeah.
There were also quite a bit of complaints that I saw while perusing different forums and threads talking
All right,
about it.
let's
One
hear
of
it.
the main ones, as I touched on earlier, was the expansiveness of the open world and how that's made it feel like it's really empty. So one complaint about there being too much running said that the game has a bad loop. There's far too much running through empty screens to reach a waypoint on your map, skipping past the few monsters you do see on your horse. Usually you are running to some daily or quest or bounty that you've already actually done. D2 and 1 feel very different because you're always fighting to progress something, but that isn't the case in D4. It feels more like an MMO, and it feels more...
But I mean, we already talked about that, right? We already covered this. You should have some time where you're just advancing through the world. You're just moving. You're just soaking it in. You're just enjoying it. Maybe you can run across an NPC and have some fun flavor text or maybe something like that. But it doesn't always have to be constant combat. You have to find that line and you have to ride the line. You really have to straddle it. Get on top of that line. Get around it. Really embrace it. You know what I mean?
Empty. A follow-up thread, also calling it a walking simulator, said that the maps are all messy and full of dead ends, not nearly enough mobs in the open world, like run for 30 seconds and kill 5 mobs in 5 seconds, then run all the way back to where you came from to another dead end. That is a concern. As I touched on, I do think that there should be a balance. I don't think you should have just...
Right. I mean, we just said that, right? It's just got to be balanced. They got to figure out that perfect balance of, okay, soak in the world, really enjoy it. Oh, nice. Here's some monsters. Let's crush those. Maybe an elite. Maybe a random map like boss or tougher monster. Yeah.
There's monsters at every corner in an open world game, but there is a balance there, and maybe this is the sort of feedback they need to increase mob density. You also have to consider too, and maybe part of this is just the level design, the zone design, two things. We're leveling up, and while leveling up to max level, we are going through and we have this pacing of combat. But remember, at max level in D4, that is when you unlock the mount.
Right.
Obviously, the spaces in between combat encounters will be shortening when you have access to your mount. It seems like they could be running into the issue where the game might be designed all across the board in the open world for the idea of players having mounts, but that is making the leveling experience feel way too sparse when it comes, again, to mob density.
That makes sense. That does make sense. If it's designed around you having a horse so that it's, spread out more, but you don't have a horse yet, then it would feel a little bit more painful, like a little bit more running to do to get to things. Hopefully they can find a way to balance it. That's what I'll say. I don't know how that should be done, but hopefully there's a way.
So I guess we'll have to see how and if they balance that, but then also if it even matters, because if D3 is any indication, once people get familiar with the game after their first playthrough, they'll be leveling up to max level in a couple of hours tops. Like, that's how it is a lot of times in ARPGs like this, especially seasonal ones, right? So it might not even matter at all if past the first playthrough, people are leveling up so quickly that it doesn't matter how it is before you have your mount, because you're going to get your mount in an afternoon.
Right.
Now, unsurprisingly, one other issue that I have seen come up is just that there are a lot of issues with a beta, which, beta is not a complete product, but here are some of the complaints that I saw. Lag issues.
Yeah, we don't need to watch the rest of this, right? This is all just like I guess normal complaints now. Like, this is nothing to do with like, hey, Diablo 4 is bad. It's like, okay, you're playing a beta and there's going to be issues, right? So, okay, we got a pretty good picture of what is going on with Diablo 4, I think. And we got a lot of good info there. A lot. I think it's pretty exciting that there's so much to do in the end game. It's a little bit concerning, them talking about the open world feeling empty. Something to do with maybe, the world is designed around having a horse or a mount. So maybe that's why it's a little bit more spread out, takes a little bit longer to find mobs and stuff like that. But man, that's pretty promising. That's pretty promising, I must say. The most important aspect being the gameplay, the actual combat feels really good, really rewarding, really smooth. That's awesome.